Welcome back to the Bloom Room. My name is Chantel, and today's video is the 7th universal law of gender. So it's the last universal law and also the final video of the universal law series. I started this series like a year ago already, and finally it's coming to a close. I hope that, having the last and final law, you can see how they all work together and see exactly how you can use them all together to help to change your life. Jumping right in the Kabbalion law of gender states, gender isn't everything. Gender has its masculine and its feminine principles, and gender manifests on all planes. So we're aware that there are many planes of causation in the universe. There's the great physical plane, the great mental plane, the great spiritual plane, and within all those planes there are even more subplanes. And the law of gender manifests on every single plane, in all things and all beings, like and unlike. We already learned about the law of polarity, and I would say the law of gender is a very significant aspect of polarity. So just to preface this by stating the obvious, that gender is not sex. Sex refers to the physical distinction between a male and female. So sex is a manifestation of gender on a certain plane, on the great physical plane, but gender in itself is energy. So there are masculine and feminine principles on every single plane. When it comes to gender is in the business of creating, of manifesting, of generating and producing. And we can see the law of gender manifested on even the smallest level, on an atomic level, when we look at atoms. Let's take a look at the scientific aspect of law of gender and how gender manifests everything that we know to be true and real. So when we take a look at an atom in the perspective of a hermeticist, in an atom, electrons are seen to be the feminine principle. And the formation of an atom is basically negative subparticles rotating and vibrating around a positive one. So hermeticists deemed the positive as the masculine and the negative as the feminine. So when it comes to forming an atom, it happens when there's a clustering of negative subparticles to a positive. So there's a union that's happening. So the positive subparticles, or the masculine subparticles, are exerting a certain influence on the negative, or the feminine. And this causes the feminine to join or combine in certain ways that go on to create the atom. And after this, another process happens in which the feminine subparticles are leaving the masculine and are actively seeking union with new masculine because of its natural impulse to create. This detachment and uniting is what goes on to create the whole chemical world. So when a feminine and masculine unite, it goes on to start the process of the masculine exerting an influence over the feminine, causing the feminine to combine in certain ways that will go on to create an atom. So this process of detachment of feminine from masculine, when the feminine decides, I'm done with the process is completed and I'm going to go seek a new union, this detachment is called ionization, and ionization is what is responsible for, everything that we know to be. So the feminine electrons, although they're deemed as negative, are actually the most active workers in nature. From their union is formed light, heat, magnetism, gravity, electricity, attraction and repulsion in the masculine and feminine subparticles. The detachment and the union is what manifests all things. Law of gender manifests gravity, allowing things to tend toward each other, but not so much in a way in which we're all colliding 24/7, Nature is so perfect in that way. And as you can see, law of gender literally manifests everything. So in science, the feminine's always doing the creative work, and the masculine is always in charge of the direction, in charge of directing energy and willpower to the feminine in order to actually start the process. Without both of these, nothing in nature, nothing in our world would be. And one is not more important than the other. They're equally important when it comes to creating the universe. In our world, we see the negative as something that's unreal or unexisting. When you think of a negative number, -3 versus a positive number, 5, negative is seen to be kind of in the underworld, not existing, the unmanifested, and the positive is seen to be real. But in electricity, this is not the case, which is why hermeticists refuse to use the biased word of negative and instead replaced it with the word feminine. In the same way that gender manifests and works on an atomic physical level, On an auric spiritual level, it's the same of like the feminine is responsible for receiving. So the feminine is receiving impressions. The feminine is an inward flow. And the masculine is what gives or expresses. That's the outward flow. Feminine is in charge of mental generation. It's coming up with new concepts and ideas, and it's what deals with the imagination. Masculine works with the will, the power, the physical power. It's what's responsible for energizing the creative portion of the mind in order to start the process of creation. Without the will, without the direction of the energy and the outward flow, the feminine would rest content in just daydreaming and creating mental images and not creating original ideas and thoughts, but only receiving impressions and just sitting with them. So we've talked about the physical atomic level, we've talked about the spiritual auric level. Let's talk about the mental level. In psychology, gender manifests as something that is really popular. A lot of psychologists have coined this as the dual mind. I'm sure you've heard of it. When it comes to the dual mind, we're talking about objective and subjective mind, conscious and subconscious, passive and active, voluntary and involuntary, the left brain and the right brain, if you will. So Hermeticists were extremely ahead of their time, obviously, and they coined this term as mental gender. So to put it shortly, the masculine aspect of mental gender is the objective, the conscious, the active mind, the voluntary, and the feminine aspect of mental gender is the passive, the subjective, the involuntary mind. And to go on a little further of what the Hermeticists believed in when it came to law of gender is, you know, this idea of the dual mind in spirituality is really popular. You know, there is you, who you think you are, and then there's the observer. There's always this aspect of like dual self. And so Hermeticists believe that, you know, to understand the purpose of each, it'll help you in being less influenced by everything around you and even internally as well. So when we're talking about the me, in essence, we're talking about the ego. We're talking about our body. We're talking about our thoughts, our characteristics, our habits, our likes and dislikes. And an over-identification with the me is what causes a lack of a foundation, and it's what causes your masculine to be weak. The me is seen as the feminine because the me is the aspect of becoming, okay? While the I is the aspect of being, the me is the aspect of becoming. And the Hermeticists viewed the me as the mental womb, capability of generating mental offspring. If you raise your vibration, you'll realize that these things, the me, is not who you are. Like I said, in essence, it's the ego. It's the things that pass, your thoughts and your feelings in your body. And the I is actually, like I said, the aspect of being. So the I is the masculine. The I is the mental aspect that wills the me. The I is the aspect that can both start the process of creation and also objectively observe and witness the creation. The I is more of your consciousness, while the me is more of your ego. Like I said, there cannot be one without the other. In order to live a spiritually and mentally healthy, balanced life, you have to have your masculine and feminine balanced. And so without the I, there would be no motivation to will the me. And without the me, there would be no sense of identity, no sense of original ideas of self. Briefly, the law of gender is also responsible for some of the more unexplainable aspects of the mind, such as hypnosis, telepathy, and psychic abilities. So the way this works basically is that telepathy and hypnosis and suggestion, the vibratory energy of the masculine is projected toward the feminine aspect of another. When we say feminine, we mean the mind and thoughts. So the vibratory energy of the masculine is projected toward the mind of another. The feminine takes this seed thought, takes it, and allows it to grow. The same way in hypnosis and suggestion. The vibratory energy of willpower. When I say this, I mean the willpower, the energy of I want to influence something, is directed toward the mind of someone else, the feminine, and the feminine then not realizing when we're talking about a more controlling, and not when it comes to telepathy, but when it comes to mind control, or when it comes to suggestion and manipulation, the feminine will accept it, take it in as if it's its own, not knowing the distinction that, you know, this thought is not mine, and then it will cause you to act and think accordingly. When you're lacking in masculine, or when your masculine is too lazy, what happens is that you are subject to the ideas and thoughts of everyone around you. You're allowing others to think and will for you. You become unaware that that's even happening. A lack of masculine is a lack of original thought and original action. A lack of masculine happens when you dwell too much in the me, when you identify too much with the ego, like I said. The principle holds the secret to magnetism, to attraction, to fascination. You know, there are just those certain people who would just draw others to them, and very convincing and interesting. And whether this be a negative or positive way, the fact of the matter is law of gender is what holds the secret to these things. And I don't want to get too much into the feminine and the masculine when it comes to specific characteristics of the feminine and the masculine, because I feel like I'm going to do another video on that. And I feel like I want this to just be the basis of a more scientific understanding of feminine and masculine. And the second video will be characteristics of feminine, characteristics of masculine, what it looks like if your feminine is too weak or overactive, and the same what happens when your masculine is too weak or overactive. So that video is going to be more of how to apply this law, I guess, in a way. But in essence, this law is responsible for the creation of the universe, the creation of all things. And so you cannot manifest without using the law of gender. All creative manifestations happen under this law, and understanding the dual aspect of everything helps you to understand, you know, the importance of both production and rest. I think that in our society, we've been in a patriarchal way for so long that the masculine and feminine is heavily imbalanced, and that the masculine is ruling. And we can see that reflected in all things, in politics, in the economy, in, you know, work life, you know, in general. Masculine is heavily outweighing the feminine. That's what makes certain things more important to us than others, you know. That's why people value production and moving and acting and working hard, and less of imagining and resting and receiving. So collectively, we're heavily imbalanced, and individually, we're all heavily imbalanced. And so that's why I wanted to just create this video to be the basis. The next video of masculine and feminine is going to be, you know, how to balance them. And what I call it when you're balancing your masculine and feminine is the union of the mind and the heart. The feminine being the heart, masculine being the mind. They meet in the middle, and there's a union that happens, and you ultimately become balanced between both of your energies. How to connect more to your feminine or to your masculine, if you're too feminine or if you're too masculine. And, you know, like I said, the feminine is not something that's should be seen as, you know, womanly, and the masculine should not be seen as something that's manly. You have to understand the importance of balancing them if you want to be successful, and if you want to have this attraction and fascination to you, and if you want to guard your heart, but also not guarding it too much, if you want to be able to receive. You know, everything is honestly polarity and gender. And so I hope this video helps you to understand the basis of it. It'll be an extension of this video, which I'm talking more specifically on how to use this law and what that means in your everyday life, how to make this work for you and be successful and manifest everything. But for right now, just understand the importance of being internally balanced, mentally balanced. And I'll see you guys in the next video, and we'll expand more on this subject.